Hello and welcome. This is the 9th episode of the Bits vs. Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Armin Grigic, and today I have a very special guest from Vamp. He's a co-founder and CTO at Vamp, and his name is Olaf Molenveld. Welcome.
Thank you, Amr. Thank you.
To start out, how did you get into tech? So how did you start out?
I guess I'm really a nerd, reading science fiction books, playing with the first editions of home computers.
Cool.
Commodore 64, VIC-20, ZX Spectrum, 48 kilobytes of RAM.
Okay.
And then...
it's a while ago.
Yeah, that's quite a while ago. I've got a few gray hairs. You don't see this on the podcast, luckily. So I guess computers always intrigued me. Space shuttle launches, all that tech stuff. And I guess I'm happy to make money with my hobby, being a nerd.
And how did you start out? So did you start out as a developer, or what was your first job in tech?
I thought I would like to be studying informatics. And then I figured out that it actually meant a lot of math, which wasn't your
forte.
One. No, not really. So I basically switched to what we called business informatics, which was in Groningen, HBO, which is kind of like I'm not sure what the English equivalent is, but it was like one of the first studies where business drivers and IT came together, and we had sociology, psychology, all kinds of like these soft skills.
Yeah, it wasn't all tech.
Yeah, it was really about knowledge systems, but also Java programming, assembly even. But actually to create models or applications that could deliver business value. And that's still what I'm doing. So I did my share of programming, CGI, Bin, Perl, ASP, Cold Fusion, but that I stopped around, I think, 2000. I didn't really do a lot of object-oriented stuff or anything. Mm-hmm. I more became like what I would call a solution architect, basically applying different technologies, understanding them, and more thinking about the architecture and how to make different components work together and deliver business value by creating synergies of these different components.
Yeah, so more high level, right? So,
yeah.
Okay. And how did you start out with Vamp? So what was the whole idea behind it when you started, and how did it come together? Yeah,
so at that time I was working at Mirabeau, which is now a Cognizant company.
Yeah.
And with my good friend Tim, he was, I think, working at Xebia at that time. Mm-hmm. And I was doing a lot of architectures around ecommerce, transactional systems, Hybris, Intershop, Demandware, combined with content management systems from Adobe or Sitecore, and then often like custom solutions around it. And all these clients, where they were first ignoring the cloud or had a hard time moving to the cloud, it was like, we don't want to go to cloud unless it's really a big driver.
Yeah, what is the cloud?
They started flipping around all of a sudden, like the critical mass kind of thing happened. So they said, we want to move to cloud unless it's not an option. So we did see a lot of trouble with porting big monolithical systems which were basically designed to run on on-prem kind of a few big machines, to move them to elastic cloud infrastructure. And then Tim was showing me Docker. I think it was 0.1 or 0.2, really early version. And he said, whoa, take a look at this. This is really cool. And I was thinking, what is this thing? And he said, it's like a zip thing for compute. For you can zip it in a Docker container, and then it will run the same on every machine. I was like, that's what they said about Java too. And we know how that came along. But he showed it to me, and we were like, wow, this is actually interesting. So this was the combination of cloud, microservices architectures, which came along at that time. We didn't call them microservices, I think, but more like service-oriented architecture 2.0. And Docker containers. And we thought, this is interesting. So we can actually create modular architectures that are easily deployable through DTAP pipelines. and can run on elastic infrastructure easily. So we started thinking about how to apply that to e-commerce platforms, and that's how we started with the company called Magnetic.io, where the idea was to create an e-commerce platform based around microservices wrapped in containers deployed on cloud, which you would probably call cloud native these days.
Yeah.
And to power that platform, to have like zero downtime upgrades, to A/B test everything, to make it dynamically scalable based on business metrics, we needed an engine that could manage these Docker containers on something like Mesos.
Yeah.
And that was basically the birth of Vamp, because we built that engine on top of Mesos first, and then Marathon came along to do these zero downtime upgrades, to do A/B testing, canary releasing. So it was an integration of HR proxy, reverse proxies, configuration, talking to Marathon APIs or Docker APIs, and then measuring stuff, putting it in Elasticsearch, and making sure that this is like a feedback loop that is managing the system all the time, which is kind of like the core of Vamp. And what happened is basically people said, e-commerce platforms, we're building those ourselves, or we still buy the stuff that is in the magic quadrants of Gartner and Forrester. So this magnetic thing, I don't feel comfortable of buying it or selling it to my management or board. But I'm really interested in that Vamp thing that you guys show, because that is actually solving a lot of the pains that I'm currently having. So
you started out with the e-commerce thing. What was the real reason behind that? Why the e-commerce part and not something else like normal applications or that don't have to do with the e-commerce thing?
Because transactional systems that actually make money, that run on multi-language, multi-country, multi-channel kind of setups with specific e-commerce and content management systems around it. That's kind of where we were active in. And that's also, I think, where the main drivers are. Like I said, I like to apply it to business drivers or business challenges. And just having a technical solution like a single application, that's interesting, but actually use or leverage that new technology for platforms that need to make money, where people actually are selling stuff or selling transactions.
Where you can't have any downtime as well.
Yeah, when you run a 24/7 global operation, there's no night and day.
Exactly.
I mean, there's always somebody awake and wanting to buy stuff from you. So that's where the real pain is, and also where these kinds of innovations are picked up the earliest. I guess it's defense and porn, and then it's e-commerce.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, because that is true. I mean, the e-commerce part is interesting because, as we said, you cannot have the downtime. You cannot, because it costs money if you're down, right?
Yeah.
So getting back to what you guys really do. So what does Vamp solve for particular clients?
Yeah. So of course we learned, and times have been changing. We've been doing this for over 4 years now. We are in the business of release management or smart release management. So you have the technical part of deploying stuff onto machines, clusters, DTAP. But when it's running, it's often like a big bang release. It's blue-green, you flip the switch. And if you talk to bigger enterprises that have money flowing through their systems, they have people called release managers. Or they have release management departments, or they have release management procedures. And having continuous delivery is kind of scaring them, because they're like, okay, so that means that automatically new stuff is running in production. And developers can push new stuff. Where's my role in this? And basically Vamp allows DevOps teams, but also these release managers to work together and have controlled releases. And a release is basically how you expose a running service or application or front end or whatever to the outside world or to other services.
Okay.
So those could be segments of users, segments of devices, countries, percentages, or a combination of the above, and then probably in multiple steps where you increase your exposure based on positive feedback from the system. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I'm just thinking about the where it all fits in, right? So where in the whole chain of events, where do you think it fits in when you look at, for example, I'm a developer and I want to set up a new release and I want to go about it. Usually I have like something running to do my build of my application, and normally what I would do is, okay, I would build the application. I would say, okay, deploy this to everyone. Yeah, because it usually is everyone. There are some cases, of course, bigger companies like Google and stuff like that are looking at, okay, how is it being used and stuff like that. Yeah. Where are you in the chain?
So we basically extend your CI and CD tool chain. So we sit behind stuff like GoCD or Jenkins or Spinnaker or GitLab. And we control the releasing, like I said. So if you look at a developer operations, like product owner kind of chain, first thing that we can add value is self-service for developers. So you can, for example, deploy your service or services onto a Kubernetes or Mesosphere cluster. And then your ops people in the team or yourself can set up a gateway to automatically expose it to your internal IPs and expose it on a specific path, like service name / version name. And then the vamp gateways basically do some, you could call it micro API gateway kind of thing, where there's a specific route from the outside world to your services, so you can take a look and see how your services actually are running. So that would be the first thing. We do the canary releasing, the automated releasing management basically. That would typically be something for an ops person to automate this with a script, like a Node.js based script, or a release manager to configure that script to say, okay, I want to do 5 steps in steps of 20% with these conditions and measuring these metrics. And the third part would be more what we currently would see, the A/B testing, feature testing, where you toggle multiple versions with environment variables or configuration settings, and you create the gateways to have multiple routes based on conditions, and you can compare how your features behave. So that will be like the value that we can add. And so we don't replace a CI or CD tool. We extend the CI or CD tool. You can deploy through vamp, but you can also deploy outside of vamp. And we pick up like selector labels or specific patterns that you
environment
define.
Variables.
And then we kick off an automation process, or we configure an additional route to start moving traffic over multiple versions.
Yeah, so how would that look in the real world? So, for example, I have a web shop and I want to test a new feature, right? I want to see, okay, is this feature that I'm, or this improvement that I'm rolling out, is it actually going to add value to my client? How would that work with vamp?
So, as a developer, you would make your CI/CD system build this new version and probably deploy it with a Helm chart or by vamp. You push it onto the cluster. You already predefine the gateway to listen for this specific service and understand how the versioning is done. Automatically a new route will be created. You can automatically also set a condition for internal IP addresses maybe, or for a specific header or cookie that you pass from your client. So the first step would be to take a look at this new version and see how it's behaving. Then you can start rebalancing traffic, which is kind of like service discovery or a mesh between the services. If it's like a service that needs to be exposed to other services, and you can start looking at behavior like technical, CPU, memory usage, maybe timeouts or other HTTP or TCP issues. From that point, you can start also controlling ingress, so basically how it's exposed to the outside world, which is more like a release management functionality, and just see how it behaves over time. Maybe you want to run through an entire week or 24 or 48 hours, and see if it doesn't really fail compared to your current version. And then the third layer would be maybe you do a test, an A/B test, based on maybe NPS scores or shopping basket value, and you want to see if this new version actually, on a feature level, creates some additional lift. So there's multiple layers there. It's like the self-service for developers to just make sure that everything is as they expect. Then it's a technical layer of technical validation of this new version, and also releasing it into the outside world and other services. And then there's the functional testing layer, where you actually start measuring for business improvements.
Yeah. So you look at, for example, in the process, you would look at, okay, this is one indicator that can tell us, okay, this has been successful, right? So you would probably set that up in Vamp as well as a measurement or whatever. So okay, for example, if I have, as you said, you have like the voting thing that we showed before the podcast. You showed me a demo of. So, for example, someone comes onto the website, it will say, okay, do you like this feature? Yes or no? And if it's 70% yes, it will say, okay, let's move to this new version because it's actually running better than the old version, right?
Yeah. We can integrate with external systems like Google Analytics or A/B testing tools, and you can use those results and analyze them, or have the external system analyze them, and use those as triggers to move forward or back specific versions. So in this specific example, often when you do like a small scale release, it's hard to get like significant results on volume. So this is a quantitative test that you do. We should say a qualitative test.
Yeah. It's not based on numbers. It's more
no. You basically want to know like a first indication of do people actually like this new feature or color scheme or button or whatever.
Yeah.
And you basically embed that into your front end or your app. You store the votes, like people saying yes or no, a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or a number of stars or whatever you want to record. And then a workflow in Vamp basically calculates the number of votes and sees I want at least 70% people giving me a thumbs up, and at least 200 votes coming back. That for me would be sufficient to roll out this new functionality or color scheme. Yeah. And then basically the workflow can automatically rebalance the gateway. And so it's not so much a starting and stopping of containers or services, it's more rebalancing traffic. So it integrates really nicely into your release pattern or schedule.
Yeah. And looking at that rebalancing thing, so what happens if, for example, I've set up a workflow, it's working like this, it actually does the rebalancing. What happens if for some reason it was still an error or whatever, and I still want to roll back? How does that work then? Do you have to like manually configure it to roll back again, or?
No, you can have multiple workflows or policies working together.
Okay.
Obviously, you need to take care of conflicting behavior. But you can have a workflow that measures the technical performance, and when something goes wrong, maybe timeouts are thrown because of you introduce this new color scheme or feature, and it has all kinds of bugs and timeouts or something will happen. Then we detect this in a health metric, and this health metric dropping to something below 80% or to 0 can actually trigger a rollback. So you can have multiple layers working together, like technical checkers and autoscalers, because obviously you also want to make sure that enough resources are allocated to this version, because you want to make sure that you actually test the right thing. Yeah, you're not testing wrong things there. You can have them set up to work together. So obviously you're not going to start experimenting with feature testing when you have technical issues underlying. So you first start with the technical automation, the technical safety net, basically. Yeah. And then you will probably move into the auto-scaling kind of optimization to make sure that everything runs within the SLAs that you define. And that's the moment you also start adding more feature testing. But that's all integrated into one automation thing. So you could also call them like a Swiss Army knife of DevOps automation. Yeah.
And looking at things like there are like a lot of new techniques like serverless coming into the to the playing field. That's taking the step a little bit further even than the containerizing thing.
Yeah.
How do you think that will impact your business? Because it primarily at the moment revolves around containering and containerization and stuff like that. So how do you think that will impact that?
Very positively, I think. And
Okay.
that wouldn't be maybe your first thought.
Yeah.
We never were about containers. We were about, or are about, smart release management, making sure that what you release and how you release it actually reduces blast radius or negative impact and optimizes performance. And right now we talk against different container schedulers like Mesosphere and Kubernetes. We're working on serverless integrations. And because the canary releasing, the release management is still the same. You still want to control who's being exposed to your new serverless functionality based on what conditions. And you still need observability, measuring to see and comparing how this new serverless function behaves compared to the old one.
Yeah.
So that's not the challenges are exactly the same. Obviously, you have other integrations on Amazon with Lambdas, for example. You have API gateways. So you need to think a little bit about where you put the vamp gateways in front of after the API gateway.
Yeah, that's one that was coming to mind. Yeah. How you would place that as well.
Yeah. So what we architecture-wise, how you typically would see it is if you are on containers, there's often like this APG or a big API gateway that sits behind your edge load balancers or your CDN, and then the vamp gateways for traffic distribution ingress, let's say, is often sitting behind that API gateway.
Okay.
So your main routing is done on the API gateway, and then it hits the vamp gateways, which are more moving towards your services.
Yeah, and know where to route stuff and based on particular like indicators that you set up. For example, you've shown me the demo as well that you have a new version that you want to test out, and you put the user agent or the browser that someone is using to Firefox. So only the Firefox people that are using Firefox will be able to see that new version, right?
Exactly. So you do that routing on that level.
Yeah.
But if you have, for example, Amazon Lambdas, and they are automatically patched into an Amazon API gateway. So then the vamp gateways would typically sit in front of that API gateway, but after probably a CDN. So they sit more in front of, and then they start controlling the traffic.
Yeah, because you want multiple functions, right?
Yeah. Or I also see an option, it's depending on the use case, where vamp starts controlling or configuring these Amazon API gateways in more detail based on how you want to release.
Yeah.
Because it's still a technical thing where you can configure these API gateways based on your preferences, but we believe that this should be more of a commodity where it's easier to configure that stuff. It's like basically, if you say cloud formation, it's kind of like, that's a lot of lines of configuration. And you see this entire ecosystem around it of tooling that helps you to create these kind of things.
Yeah, things like Terraform and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Right?
So that could be the level that we add value.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because as you're looking at it from a side that you're basically agnostic, right? It doesn't matter what backend we throw at it. We just want to be able to give you a value of rerouting the traffic the right way, measuring it, and actually taking decisions on that, right?
Yeah. So we do see target platforms. You have the Amazon ecosystem, you have the Google ecosystem, you have the Azure ecosystem. So there, we have the schedulers like Kubernetes and Marathon on Mesosphere, DCOS. So these are configurable in vamp. So you can basically configure what kind of scheduler driver you want to talk to. We're working on Istio integration also as an alternative to HA proxy. I wouldn't be surprised if Envoy is also a driver at some point that you can use. That's all configuration, and it basically switches drivers. So the configuration that comes out of vamp will be different.
Yeah.
But for typical target platforms where we say, okay, Istio with Kubernetes on Google Cloud, or Azure with AKS and some form of networking, we will provide like sets of drivers that integrate really nicely with those stacks, because you also have the secret storage that's probably different on those clouds. The service principles, the security model, the networking model.
It's in a sense also a little bit like what people are doing with ORMs, right? So it doesn't matter. I have one kind of language, but it can connect to multiple kind of databases like Postgres or MySQL or whatever. Right?
Yeah. And
you're doing the translation. That's
and it's nice to have. It's not per se a big value driver of the vamp product itself, but the way it's designed with the modular drivers, it's something you basically get for free almost. So we have a multi-tenant version, this Vamp Enterprise, so you can mix and match clouds and schedulers. And in the future also mix and match serverless and containers, and maybe, I don't know, unikernels or anything that comes up and we can integrate with. But I guess it's not per se a driver to stay like really vendor agnostic or cloud agnostic, because at some point people probably make a choice.
Yeah, there's the big three, right? I mean, in most cases people will, if they're picking a cloud provider, they'll probably go to Amazon or Microsoft or Google, right? I mean, those three are kind of the big players in the game.
Yeah, I do see a big value, of course, in multi-cloud, in the sense that you maybe want to develop on-prem or on a specific cloud, but your production is not allowed to run there, or with GDPR or data local compliancy, you need to run on on a set of different clouds or environments. And then it becomes quite valuable, but it's more to do with kind of the schedulers that we support. So you can mix and match those things. And I guess you choose like your primary stack, but you want to have failover. Or maybe you want to have specific workloads that are less critical to run on spot instances on the cheapest available provider. So those kind of scenarios will appear, I guess, at some point when clients or users will reach a specific maturity level.
Yeah, because talking about the maturity, that's a good segue into what I was going to ask is, when you guys started out, the maturity of all kinds of things like the containerization, the orchestration of containers and stuff like that, it was pretty in its infancy at that time. How do you, because you talk to a lot of companies, how do you see that landscape evolving? What do you think that state is right now of those kind of things? So where are we at? Is it coming out of that infancy, or what do you think about that?
I think what I do see is that people realize that it's harder than they thought it was. And that's, of course, the first step.
Yeah.
You need to walk into the wall and actually see, oh man, the complexity has increased because I'm now slicing up my monolithical application into 10
smaller
or 20
parts,
smaller parts, which are applications in itself. And they need to run in a distributed system over cloud infrastructure or on cloud infrastructure.
Yeah.
And they need to be scalable, and
they
can move around.
And
they need to be failing, and they can move around, and it's totally different from your monolithical architecture.
One server, one application.
You see companies moving back.
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather have one big monolith that I just scale out and can control. And this realization that it's harder, that's an important one, because it actually gives us some reality check kind of moment. And second, I think a lot of people are kind of having a hard time with the microservice architecture, like how to do database migrations and database schemas and versioning, and how to make that work, which are more architectural challenges. And but I do see a lot of good progress here. So people are actually running microservices in production. They are realizing the challenges and solving these challenges in different ways and forms. So yeah, I think maturity. Let's say we kind of like past the area where people were kind of fed up with the complexity, and now are actually doing it.
Yeah.
And I guess also the managed container stacks help a lot.
Yeah.
Because 2 years ago you actually needed to manage and set up your own Kubernetes cluster, which is hard, or your own DCS cluster, which is hard.
Yeah.
And now you can basically go into each of the cloud providers and do a few clicks.
And you have the available cluster, right?
Yeah, and it's running, and you can do it over multiple AZs or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so it... As you said, it's more a mindset change actually than the actual tools, because the tools are there, right? I mean, the tools are there to be able to do the whole containerization, orchestration, and stuff like that. But it's more the mindset change that you are actually switching to a different architecture than what you were doing before, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I think what's actually interesting to see is that people went down the rabbit hole. So you moved to like microservices, you went to Kubernetes or Mesosphere, DCS, Docker, Istio maybe, traffic or any proxy, and log aggregation, dashboarding, observability. And at some point, people almost seem to forget why they were moving to microservices in the first place, which was higher velocity with less issues.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we kind of are pushing, where we say, okay, guys, it's all nice, all this technical stuff. You can do amazing stuff, but let's not forget why we started doing this. We wanted to release faster with less issues.
Yeah.
And often, what you see is that people say, we've got this continuous delivery pipeline, we've got more microservices, we release much faster, but we also have much more issues, because we don't have maybe the testing framework in place to test in production we cannot move back. We need to move forward all the time. So it takes us X amount of hours to fix stuff in production. So you get to the next level of velocity, but you also need to make sure that if you drive faster,
you're still in control.
Yeah, you need to have better observability, but also better safety nets in place. And so I think what will happen now is that the business also starts bugging technical people, engineers, like, okay, you promised us you would deliver when we started this last year. So where is it? Where do I see this higher velocity, and where are these less issues that you promised us?
Yeah, testing becomes a lot more testing in general is a good idea, but the testing frameworks and actually the whole user testing, and it becomes so important. Actually, one of the biggest things in that trajectory is also testing, right? Because I'm not sure if you can even do the kind of higher velocity if you don't have that testing in place, right?
You need to have the testing in place, and testing can be all kinds of things, obviously.
Yeah.
But synthetic testing is only one thing. I mean, you're simulating traffic patterns or load. It's all under control, which is not the real world.
Yeah.
So the real test always finds place in the real world.
Yeah.
With all kinds of unpredictable patterns and data flowing through your system, and people using it in ways that you didn't envision, and you obviously didn't test for. But also an interesting aspect I find is that people actually don't have any idea how to run in production, what kind of topology with what kind of configuration settings, like CPU, memory, how many instances. You have a feeling maybe that you don't really know, and you would probably over-dimension.
Yeah.
And then keep it there.
Yeah, let's keep it at 16 gigs of memory, for example, and it's not even not even close.
Yeah, and you don't have the systems in place to scale down or try out other settings to see how they perform. But also configuration versus code is an interesting one, because I think most failures or outages are actually configuration issues in production, where somebody changes something,
Yep.
and it doesn't work. But it's not so much in the code. So that's an interesting area, how to test configuration, basically, how to make sure configuration changes or
don't break production. Yeah. It's a good one. And I was thinking about a little pushing it a little bit back. So Vamp, do you see Vamp still as a startup, or is it a little bit further?
No. Yeah, I think formally we are seen as a scale up.
Yeah.
But what's the definition of a startup? It's actually finding product market fit. And I feel that we have a clear understanding of where the product market fit is, but we still need to do more work or more validation there. It's like the faster horses. I mean, we're still kind of like, if you ask people, what do you need? You get this, we need faster horses answer.
Yeah.
And we have, of course, tools to do much more advanced things, but maybe they're not valuable at this moment because other things need to be in place first. So that validation of these different ideas that we have, and we have a lot of pilots and proof of concepts and things that actually work, but are just ideas.
Yeah.
And we need to still, I guess, see what sticks on the wall best. And in that sense, we have a global ambition. So we really believe that what we can do with Vamp and the vision that we have is actually valuable on an international level.
Yeah.
So that means that we need to validate more on a global scale. So it currently runs in like 3 continents. But we want more data points. We want to understand better.
Yeah, and more clients that can also give you input on where to go, right?
Yeah.
It has come a long way. I've told you this in our conversation before. I feel like a few years ago it was still searching for what's actually the target, or what are we going to do, and it's really going to be the like release management thing. So if you would have to give someone an advice when they're starting up, or when they want to start their own startup, what would that one thing be that you would give them as an advice when starting?
Yeah, that's interesting. We're an alumni of Startup Bootcamp, which is an accelerator, just like Rockstart or Y Combinator. Interestingly enough, you see this interesting dynamic where smart people with good ideas come in, and they start pitching it, and they start building like an MVP, and then they bring in like innovation managers and people from all kinds of enterprises and companies that are interested in all these smart ideas. But I feel it's the wrong way around, because every company has a very clear view, most of them, on what their challenges are, actually. So if you can bring people together, smart people with smart ideas that understand this technology and can build cool stuff with it, and you have them sit together with companies that have real-world challenges, and they start talking about a minimal viable outcome or something they would like to achieve, and then tune that idea on that problem, the chances are that it's scalable are much higher than first creating an MVP kind of thing and then see if it's
gonna stick.
Yeah. So my first advice would be create something minimal, but more on a minimal viable outcome kind of thing for a specific vertical or business that you know or you have contacts with, and really push on having people use it. Like not trial it or set it up in a hello world kind of innovation bubble, but really find people that say, if you build me this thing, I'm going to use it next week, and I'm going to use it every day because it's really powerful to me.
Yeah.
And if you find those people, then chances are they will talk about it, they fall in love with it, they will tell other people about it, and it will scale. And that's a more efficient way than building bigger thing,
something and
then see where you can find somebody that actually likes it. Obviously, the faster horses thing also applies here. I always say that, like, with the iPod, I mean, if you started telling people that you could have like this little cigarette box with 3,000 CDs in it, they would say, I've got my CD wallet and my Discman, so why do I need this? But the moment you start touching it and then clicks and you rotate it around, I still have my original iPhone somewhere, iPod. But the moment you grab it and you feel it and the look and feel and how
it becomes real,
yeah, it's like, but this is actually really cool. And yeah, so you need to have it in your hands or work with it to understand maybe the value. But that's what I mean with this minimal viable outcome thing. You need to provide a little thing that people can actually touch and feel, and then see, okay, are you willing to use this? And that using is really, that gives you the real focus.
Yeah.
Because they will tell you lots of different things, very different from some innovation manager that looks at a slideware or some screens and says, yeah, it would be really cool. I would use it if it has feature X, Y, and Z, and then you build X, Y, and Z, and I say, yeah, but it still needs a feature this, and this, and then I would really use it. And then you're in like off.
Yeah. You don't have the focus anymore then, and into what really adds value for a particular customer, right?
Yeah, but it's really hard because you need to have the connections. You need people or companies that open up, that are honest and open for people to say, okay, yeah, this is something that we really have trouble with.
Yeah,
and it seems to be in your knowledge space. So if we could have this and this, and then of course you need to do the 5 times why and the root cause analysis and really sit with people and then ask them about, okay, what are you currently doing and how would you like to improve it? And if we would build this, would that work for you? And so you need to have that dialogue, which is not a very technical dialogue. It's really like how to get into the minds of people and start to understand what they actually would need on a day-to-day basis. And I think accelerators can really help there.
Yeah, because you have the mentors and stuff like that.
Yeah,
right?
They have the connections to the companies, and if you would, and I think they're also working on this process of flipping it around a little bit more to start working earlier together.
Okay, and what are you most proud of? That's always the tricky question at the end.
I think that we're still alive.
Yeah, that you're still alive after 4 years.
Yeah, we're still alive, which is not easy, to be totally honest. And just to learn from yourself and from the people around you that you are willing to go the extra mile and just keep on pushing and not give up. It's really something that feels great. Yeah. I mean, it also gives you the validation that you really believe in this vision. I'm also really proud when I Google sometimes on Vamp and I see like photos of Japanese people sitting in a room with Vamp on their screens, and I cannot understand anything of what's all in Japanese. And then you see these guys smiling and like, whoa, people in Japan I don't know, they're actually using it.
Yeah.
That entire idea that somebody else you never spoke to is using your software.
Creation,
and it's the same in South Korea. They run it at scale and insane big clusters.
Yeah.
And everywhere. And yeah, that it's kind of like people grasp it, they get it, and they use it, and they are talking about it and using it. I guess that's what you... That gets me out of bed.
Yeah. That's also what keeps you going, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. I like that answer. Okay, so how can people find Vamp?
Go to www.vamp.io.
Okay.
Or you can skip the www part. I think if you just go to vamp.io, you get to our website. And you can just apply for a trial version, which gives you all the cool features, and you can play around with. And I think we provide you a 30-day trial version. And so that's kind of, there's documentation on it, how to install it, how to set it up, tutorials, how to get an understanding of what to do with it. And
Okay, cool. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Amr.
And for the listeners, you can find Bits vs. Bytes on bitsvsbytes.com. Also, we have Instagram, Twitter, and SoundCloud. It's all Bits vs. Bytes. I want to thank you all for listening, and until next time.